Hello everybody, I want to thank you so much for coming back and watching our next video. I'm going to share quite a bit of my story and where I'm coming from and part of what brought me to this place and in a desire to have a community to grow in like this. And I hope that something that I share helps you, if in no other way, to let you know that you're not alone. And I hope that you really join in and help us see your story as well, because I think it's so important that we share together and that we, through our shared experiences and through everything that we're going through, that we can really build something worth being a part of and help each other, take things to the next level. And so today, as a topic, I want to talk about the idea of providence and things I just can't believe anymore. And I think that'll make sense as we go through, certainly, and I believe you'll be able to relate to some of it. So the darkest time of my life is what really jump-started my, I don't want to say descent, my change in how I see things and where my views of God and stuff really turned around in a lot of ways for the better. I think they're more correct now, but I wouldn't recommend it as a mode to get there. But 2007, we get the news that we are going to be parents for the first time, and we're just ecstatic. Life couldn't be better. It had been a long, hard road of, doctor's visits and fertility tests and just countless prayers and, wondering, we always wanted to be parents, and we find out we're pregnant and everything's just going great. I mean, it's just wonderful, and we're so excited, and person after person, it was like there was just confirmation after confirmation that Josiah was going to be very special and was going to do big things. Oh, as a parent, those of you that are parents, you know how you think, all these plans that you have for them, and I can still, see the plaque to go on the wall from 1 Samuel for this child I prayed. And the Lord, granted me the petition of my heart. It just spoke volumes. I can still see it, and I can remember coming to church and having a super nice lady there at the church. I had a dream and saw Sabrina wearing a particular colored dress, and she was pregnant, and this woman just wasn't surprised when we told her, and this was just another one of those God moments, and just so amazing. Everything was just wonderful. It was perfect. It was ordained. It was all a God thing. And we were so just excited to be wrapped up in it and to be in the middle of it and to be a part of what God's doing. And I'm not going to drag you through all the terrible details or anything. That's not the point I'm getting at here. But setting all of that up, our son was born with an incredibly rare genetic condition, and at 4 days old we lost him. And I can't tell you the sorrow. I can't describe the anger and the questions with God, with everything that had happened and all that we'd gone through and everything in between. It's really impossible for me to put it into words. This wasn't just my son. He was God's son. I mean, he was prayed for. He was anointed, and just the embodiment of everything spiritual that I knew to be true. And then he was just gone. And all of those hopes and those dreams and that future just vaporized right before my eyes, just like some big atomic bomb had been dropped on my family, and everything that I understood to be true about God and my faith and God's work in our lives and everything in between just immediately just kind of went up in smoke, and all these things that I had planned in relation to my faith was just shaken and beaten and in many instances just flat out deflated or destroyed. I felt a lot like Abraham, given a son, and maybe faster, but just immediately, like it was being demanded back from me. I get the promise, and here's my son of promise, and he's being taken away, and I desperately was looking for my sacrificial ram somewhere hidden in a bush somewhere, and until the finality of it all just really set in, and we got, I was convinced something huge had to happen, but it didn't happen. There was no escape. There was no help coming, and it was just loss. And to make matters worse, when you go through things like this, there's not much of a place for you and your experiences and all these questions and stuff in the church. It's not that people don't love you, and it's not that people don't care. I hope you don't hear it that way. We had many people love us and do everything that they knew to do to help us and to be there for us and things. It's not that. It's just that this is uncomfortable territory. We don't have answers for these things. I still don't have answers for these things, and they no one in your church or in any church you visit is going to have them, and so it's very uncomfortable for everyone involved. So the default is to do their best to be there for you, and for us collectively to tread water, deal with the pains and the struggles and the questions as long as we can, so that we can eventually get back to normal life and normal faith and back to the way things are supposed to be, as it were, and things like that. And so that's kind of the experience. So many I've talked to that have gone through stuff, that's kind of their experience. They go and people want to embrace them and hug them and love on them, but when it really comes to, but why and how do I deal with this in my faith? And it's much more of doing our best to buy ourselves some time so that time can heal those wounds. But the problem is, time doesn't heal those wounds the way that we think that they do or wish that they would. When you endure really awful things, those things, you don't really get healed. You get changed. And I'm not saying there's no measure of healing that takes place and God mends your heart in ways, but more than you're healed and delivered, you're changed. You're not who you used to be, and many times we don't get better, especially in the beginning, and when we don't get better, if there's not a place that will receive us and our pain and our struggles and our transformation that we've gone through in a helpful way, then instead of getting better, many times we get bitter. And sometimes people, can really grow to hate the structure that brought about the faith that they used to have, a faith in a place, a church that they poured their entire life into. And when they needed it the most to take them seriously and consider everything they're going through, there just really wasn't a place for those things to fit. There was a place for them to attend, but not necessarily always a place for what they brought to the table. And for those of us that have gone through those things, there is no going back to who we were. There are things that you just can no longer believe, because there are things that you can't unhear and unsee and unthink and unexperience. I remember when we were the youth pastors for a season, I always told them, I was like, hey guys, listen, it's very important with the internet, everything that's going on. Trust me when I tell you, there are things that you cannot unsee. There are things you cannot unhear. You'll make your life more difficult. Don't put yourself in that. Be careful, little ears and little eyes, and be careful, adult mouths and everything else, what we say and what we do, because we can't take those things back, and those things don't change. And so here we are, we're left with what we have, and all these thoughts and questions and struggles and doubts are out of the box. they're they're running wild, and we can't ever put them back in. You can't bottle them back up. We're just left with what's left. We're left with who we are and what remains of who we used to be, and we have to do what we can with what we have. And even though the people care, their lives eventually go back to basically the way they were, to normal life. They can, escape back to their blissful ignorance and their kind of convenient dismissal of all these things that have happened, because they weren't in the blast radius, so to speak. Their lives weren't completely altered by what happened. They saw the blast and they could feel the heat, and somebody they cared about was affected, but they themselves, it's much easier to go back to that former state of mind, or it's just only possible to return to that former state of mind when you're not the one who was right in the middle of things. And I don't say that to be mean or condescending, or to say that I'm better or smarter or anything. It's to say, so many times I look at myself 10 years ago and I say, man, I wish I could think like that guy thought. I wish I could go back to that state of mind. Sometimes, it's just things were so much simpler then. Things were, so much easier to just go with the flow back then before all this other stuff happened. And so that's what I'm talking about, is that, when you've not had those experiences, then sometimes you can kind of escape back to that previous mindset and be back there. But, here we are. And we are who we are, and maybe you can relate, post things like this. You've been changed. The way you think is rewired. How you see things and what computes no longer, what used to compute doesn't line up anymore. And when you hear things, when you hear, I can't hear teaching and preaching and stuff without at times, hearing some of those things that I heard my whole life and just thought they were fine. But now I hear them and I'm like, but that can't be so because of what I've been through. Because if what I've been through, I know it's true. A lot of times I wish it wasn't, but I know it's true. And if that was true, then this doesn't make any sense. What do I do with this? And, you may have been in those those classes or groups or something, and, they really start churching it up, and we really start laying it on thick with the way we like to say things. And, we talk about problems like they're just, fictional things. They're not real tragedies that happen. And we say, oh, we don't have to understand why, because God's ways are higher than our ways. And, everything happens for a reason. There's some purpose out there, and everything will work out for the best for those that serve God. And, because God's never taken by surprise, and He can do anything and everything whenever He wants. So let's just all take a deep breath and enjoy the fact that that's who we serve, and this is the life that we lead. And I know some of these ideas began in Scripture, but when we pull them out of context and we stitch them together the way that we like to stitch them together sometimes, they become very harmful, and they hurt those people that have been through things. And you start asking the logical questions when you're the one that has gone through those things, and you hear these types of discussions happen, and many times you just can't help but to try to to add your experience to this and say, but what does this mean? It's like, well, if all that's true, then why wasn't my situation different? Why weren't they healed? Why didn't they get brought through? Surely they were worth the effort and the time. Surely they, that somebody to grow up to be a great man or woman of God is much better than them dying at a young age. Or why would my son, my daughter, my mother, my father, why would God not save them, but miraculously heal my neighbor down the street? These are logical questions. These are things but they throw a big monkey wrench into a lot of our favorite things to say sometimes. And when we start being logical that way, and we start asking those questions that could go on and on, we start poking holes in things that we've believed our whole lives. Sometimes we don't have good answers for them, and the response is oftentimes very similar, a lot the same. We don't know what to do with them, and so this becomes this very uncomfortable situation.
Boy, this party really died.
Awkward. It gets to be very awkward. And, everyone's looking around. What do we do now? What are we supposed to say? I mean, these are thoughts that everybody has, behind closed doors, when nobody can ridicule them or make them feel stupid for asking a question or offer criticism when they're questions we all, 100% of us, no matter what we've been through or haven't been through, it's things we all sit and wonder about. And too many times there's not a place, and when we really, throw it out there for the group to consider, it gets very quiet and, look at the time, we got to get going. And, maybe, we try our best to console the person, I'm so sorry, and stuff, but we never really get back to the problem and the real question. Our default is just to tread water, as long as we can, as long as it's needed for us to get over this so we can get back to where we were. And I believe God is pushing us beyond that. And in order to get beyond that, we can't just hang on to these little, fluffy thoughts and images of what life is. We have to step out and realize that life is life, and that these things are important for us not just to acknowledge, but for us to include in our lives, in our faith communities, to bring them in and let them season our faith and let them season our studies and season our messages and be a part of who we are, because they are a part of who we are. If we deny that, all we're doing is just leaving out what is some of the most fundamentally human parts of the walk of faith. And that's that we all suffer and we all have pains. It rains on the just and the unjust, and we're all in this together. And that God's for us and not against us. He's not got it in for you. I've been there. I'm going through those things, and somebody else, they're struggling with that stuff. We've got to be able to respond better to these experiences and learn from these experiences together. We don't have to have all the answers. But if we're really going to be the church and the community of faith that grows together, we do have to be present. Present for one another. Present in these circumstances, so that we can all grow and move forward together. While we always want to go back and say, well, God's ways are higher than our ways, and we'll just never be able to fully understand God and those things. And that's true to a degree, but I do believe we have to do better, because God has provided so much more for us than just, He's done better. John chapter 15 and verse 15, he talks about that we're not just servants. He says servants have no idea about the master's business because they're servants. But he says, I've called you friends, and I've not withheld anything from you. We are part of the family, and God has offered us so much more in His Word and speaking through our experiences that we can do better than just saying, He's just bigger and greater and smarter. He's those things, sure, but we can do better. And part of being able to do better, I believe, is coming together and hearing from one another and letting these experiences not tear us down, but let them build us up as a community together. Let them be a source of solidarity, a source of coming together, a place where we can all relate, because we all know what it's like to lose and to hurt. And it can be a thing that can be very empowering if we'll let it and if we'll give it a place. And also, I use this scripture a lot. I quote it to myself a lot. And this idea is, Revelation chapter 12 and verse 11, where the victory that is to come, they overcome by the blood of the Lamb, of course, but also the word of their testimony. When we think testimony, we usually think of, the grand things God's done, seas parting and money falling from the skies. I needed rent and some stranger handed me $500 and, but my son was sick and he, God just healed him. The doctors didn't know it was just a miracle. That, all these things, we look at these things as testimonies, and they are testimonies, but they're incomplete because they don't tell the whole story. Because your testimony is your story, and your story has highs and it has lows, and we need to be able to share with one another. We need to hear your story, what you've been through, where you're struggling, questions that you still have, things that might have helped you, things that hurt you. These are things that we need as a community to know, or we're just doomed to repeat them, and we're stuck in our own little bubbles thinking, oh, it's just me, I've got all these problems, there's something wrong with me, because nobody else is dealing with these things. But if we would be open as a people and share with one another and let people in a little bit and really share your story, then I believe God can do some just amazing things. A thought come to my mind in closing, and with this in mind, and I think it is just 100% true. You are a part of God's solution to someone's problem. You and your story and what you bring to the table will play a role in helping somebody if you will let yourself be a part of that. He's called us all, God has called us all to something, and not just something, but to life together. And if we will share that life with our brothers and our sisters, then we will be a source of healing for somebody along the way. I hope something that's been said here helps someone watching, but I also hope that you all will share some of your story. And I just know that somebody else reading those things needs to hear it. They need to know they're not alone. They need to know somebody else went through that and they survived, and they lived to tell about it. And we need to hear our story. Tell your story. I encourage you, please share it with us. I thank you so much for once again tuning in. I hope that something helped you. I'm sorry that it's so incredibly long. I hope that I can do better on time moving forward. But thank you for tuning in. Please share your story. And I hope you all have a wonderful and blessed rest of your day. Peace.